A terrific Tuesday to you. This is Should We Talk About the Weather, Episode 2. It is Tuesday, the 14th of June, 2016, and I am your host, Trevor Tooth. Today we're going to be speaking about cloud seeding in particular. I'm going to focus on cloud seeding for a majority of the show, and especially its relation to the recent floods in Australia. The reason why I'm mentioning cloud seeding is because it does come under the umbrella of things like weather modification and chemtrails. So this article on the ABC website was issued on the 10th of the 6th, 2016. It is titled, Hydro Tasmania Asked to Explain Cloud Seeding in Catchment Day Before Flooding. It was in The World Today. It is by Will Ockenden. Tasmania's government-owned energy company has been asked to explain why it conducted cloud seeding over the Derwent River catchment the day before flooding began this week. The catchment flooded on Monday near Ouse, I think I pronounced that correctly, Ouse or Ouse, in southern Tasmania, where the search continues for a missing farmer. In the state's north, one person was killed and another remains missing. Cloud seeding is a technique used to increase rain to bolster dams and involves the addition of a substance to suitable clouds to encourage the growth of ice crystals or raindrops. Premier Will Hodgman said he was told Hydro Tasmania authorised cloud seeding on Sunday morning in the Upper Derwent catchment, even though heavy falls were forecast. Mr. Hodgman told 936 ABC Hobart Hydro's decision was difficult to fathom at face value, but Energy Minister Matthew Groom was seeking answers. That's why we've sought the explanation from Hydro Tasmania as to those matters. The Minister has sought that, he said. It's certainly my expectation that will be provided at the earliest opportunity to respond to those matters. Hydro Tasmania has confirmed it flew a cloud seeding flight the day huge storms approached the country's east coast. Documents show the flight took place on Sunday morning while there were flood warnings in place in the north. The flight seeded clouds for more than an hour and a half just north of Great Lake, one of the largest water storage dams in the state. The flight was targeting the Upper Derwent catchment, which mainly feeds water to the several hydroelectric dams which lie downstream. And you will find that they're pretty much seeding clouds almost every day and have been for many years now to make sure that their hydroelectricity keeps pumping, keeps ticking over. If you'd like to look more into that, I'll see if I can post some links to that after I finish the show. Farmers demand answers. Farmers in the Ouse area, I'm still not sure of the pronunciation of that, like Scott Ashton Jones, want to know why the cloud seeding went ahead while flood warnings were in place for the northern half of Tasmania. The extent to which cloud seeding has exaggerated the flood is still to be determined, of course, but the evidence from previous cloud seeding operations is that it works and therefore it will have exaggerated the flood to some extent, he said. The Hydro has always claimed positive results from cloud seeding. George Mills said he could hear the flight on Sunday morning and wondered what was going on. We want to understand whether the cloud seeding has helped to create this massive flood from the local rivers which we've never seen, he said. If the Hydro had something to do with their cloud seeding, well, we want to understand that because in the future we need to have closer information. Hydro not in position to comment. Hydro Tasmania will not answer questions about both Sunday's cloud seeding flights and its policies on using the technique when there are current flood warnings. A spokeswoman said it would be inappropriate to comment. Really? At this point, Hydro Tasmania is not in a position to provide more information, she said. Experience suggests that in the aftermath of a severe natural disaster such as this, some form of government inquiry follows. In light of the unfortunate death of one person and with grave fears for two people still missing, there is likely to be at least a coronial inquest. Let's hope so. The community of I'm still not sure of the pronunciation, has been left devastated by the floods, which arrived with little warning in the early hours of Monday morning. Farmers in the district have reported the loss of hundreds of sheep and cattle and significant infrastructure losses. Bureau had flood warnings in place. The Bureau of Meteorology has confirmed flood warnings were in place for regions of Tasmania when the flood took place. The first media release alerting the Tasmanian community to likely impacts of the event was issued on Friday the 3rd of June, a Weather Bureau spokesperson said. Detailed updates have been provided directly to the local media throughout the event. The spokesperson said the first flood watch for Tasmania was issued at midday on Friday, with warnings following on Saturday. The first flood warnings were issued on Saturday afternoon, 6 to 12 hours before significant rain began to fall across northern Tasmania, they said. The first minor flood warning for these rivers was issued at 10:36 p.m. on Sunday after the cloud seeding took place. The next day, unprecedented rainfall resulted in major flood warnings for 7 Tasmanian rivers, including those above. So, that's that article, and I just want to comment also that we saw in my area of the Illawarra unprecedented rainfall. It was over 300 millimeters in some areas that almost came out of nowhere, and I'd like to thank Robert Deutsch for bringing to my attention what looked to be engineered clouds prior to these storms arriving on the east coast of Australia. Stepped RF affected chemtrailed clouds being pushed in towards the coast, and I'd like to delve more into that, but I prefer Robert come on the show sometime if he'd like to explain a bit more about how he'd gathered that information, and just if he could explain that in detail, I'd be grateful. In the meantime, I'd like to go to some other relevant articles about cloud seeding in Australia. So you can see it's not a new phenomenon. This article from the Brisbane Times. The headline is Bjelke-Petersen government spent $50,000 on cloud seeding. This is dated the 2nd of January 2014. Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen's government spent $50,000 in an attempt to make it rain, newly released cabinet documents show. In one of the previously secret 1983 state cabinet documents, released on New Year's Day under the 30-year rule, it was revealed that the Bjelke-Petersen cabinet agreed to spend the money to conduct cloud seeding operations in Queensland. In his February 18, 1983 submission to Cabinet, Sir Joe successfully urged his colleagues to bankroll a trial of American meteorologist Irving Crick's cloud seeding scheme. We'll have to look a bit more into Irving Crick. I haven't read much about him yet, but I'm sure that'll open a can of worms. Basically, the Crick process generates ionized silver iodine particles in a generator located on the ground, Sir Joe wrote in his submission to Cabinet. These particles are subsequently conveyed to the target cloud area by natural convection currents, which they are released to increase the probability of rain. Dr. Crick, whose forecasts are credited with the timing of the massive D-Day invasion of Normandy in World War II, was the United States' first commercial cloud seeder. Well, there you go. He died in 1996, aged 89. In its obituary, the New York Times noted the American meteorological establishment, with whom Dr. Crick had battled throughout his life, thought his rain-making techniques were of questionable value. But 13 years earlier in Queensland, Sir Joe at least was willing to give him a chance to prove his theories, and time was of the essence. Dr. Crick's agent, Albert Oakey, stressed that the chances of succeeding in rain-making are greatly enhanced if the process is carried out during the wet season, and this allowed possibly only a further 6 to 8 weeks within Queensland this financial year, Sir Joe told his cabinet colleagues. The president of the Cattlemen's Union has suggested that the process may have applicability to the present drought situation facing Queensland's cattle producers. I believe that the CRIC process should, at least, be tested under the Queensland conditions during the current season, with a view to evaluating its potential for future larger-scale weather modification, e.g. hail suppression and rainfall precipitation. The Bjelke-Petersen government was not the only Queensland government to invest in cloud seeding. More than 2 decades later, in 2006, the Beattie government allocated $7.6 million on a cloud seeding trial in southeast Queensland during that period's devastating drought. So you have there a brief summary of the recent weather modification, early investment in Australia in weather modification, and I'd also like to throw in there, which I'll add links to, but I won't necessarily read out in full in this particular episode, about Malcolm Turnbull's investment in weather modification, and also leading up to the Brisbane floods a few years ago. In the meantime, I'd like to go to our first track for this show. This is by Fatang.